Hi, my name is Ginny, also known as Two-Thirds Lotus, and this clip is part of my series analyzing the Essential Bukowski, edited by Abel DeBrito. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as it was streamed on Twitch, with all the imperfections and tangents of a live stream. If you want to learn more or catch me live, make sure to check out the description, otherwise enjoy the incredible work of Charles Bukowski. Let's dive into Bukowski because I do genuinely want to read today. And I'm not so much in a yapping mood either. It's been a while, Charles. Like a week. Too long. For Jane. 225 days under grass. And you know more than I. They have long taken your blood. You are a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. For Jane, by Charles Bukowski. This is a few things. We read a poem about tigers 2 days ago, I believe, by High Caliber. That was Hungry Hungry Thing. And short and sweet. And powerful, methinks, although I haven't really engaged with it yet. This one is going to take me some time, I think. I'm not sure if my brother will have kids. I know he wants them in the future, but who knows when that will happen. Yeah, things happen on their own pace. I'm going to read this again. For Jane. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood. You are a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. For Jane, by Charles Bukowski. My sister desperately wants kids but can't quite. Endometriosis, and I don't want any kids. These are reasonable things. I'm not going to be able to have kids. Hormones have functionally made me a eunuch, which is lovely. I was talking to a friend and she's like, I was like, being a eunuch sounds like a good vibe. And then she's like, you're already a eunuch. I haven't had a vasectomy, but that's reasonable. Was Jane Charles's first love? One might argue that Jane was Charles's only love. If I'm being poetic about it. But I think this is a way to put it. It was not the first person, but Jane is the most important lover that Bukowski had. The last poem we read is it's called For Jane, With All My Love, which was not enough. So he has multiple poems about Jane, and to Jane, and for Jane. And she died. I think they were together for a few years. I'm not sure if they were married, but this would have been early in his career. she dies and it tormented him. And it seems in his poetry that he does not forget Jane. I'm not sure if there's other Jane poems in this book. It's interesting, the poems get longer as we go deeper into the book, which is understandable. Genius of the Crowd, I like this poem a lot. I don't immediately see anything about Jane, but we've read a few things that make mention of her. It's okay. I was wondering if, depending on when he got with her, if he became more, I'll say, promiscuous, for lack of a better word, after her death, or if he was always like that. I believe he was a dirty old man, self-described words, even when he was a young man. I think he was always promiscuous and drinking, and I think the problems with alcoholism came early, if I'm recalling correctly. I think his most prolific years of alcoholism were at the very start of his poetic career, or maybe even before he really started to find success writing, like in his early 20s and maybe even before that. He has a word for it, like his something decade, which is like really very Bukowski, you know. But Jane was his deepest love, as far as I'm aware. For Jane, 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood, you're a dry stick in a basket. I do actually really like this specific word use here, just because the rhyme sort of implies another word, casket, that we do not get. And I almost read it the first time as casket, because this is what we would expect in a poem about death. But you're a dry stick in a basket. So then this is referring to some kind of being woven in, maybe, to something larger. I'm unsure. But I'll note that. Woven in. Is this how it works? Is this how it works? I like this line. In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. So, probably reasonable to think about what the tigers represent, because the tigers have found me and I do not care, is how this poem concludes, and that is a very powerful, powerful thing, not caring. You know, sometimes we say things like, oh, I don't really care about stuff. I think not caring is a very, very fundamentally powerful emotion, and one we maybe don't see used very often in literature, because like we write about the things we care about and the deep and artistic and beautiful aspects of life. This is what we like to do, and yet that makes not caring, in many cases, all the more powerful, because it's just sort of this oblivion of mind, especially coming from an artist, someone who deeply cares about things and expresses and creates. when we describe a state of not caring, it is important, and it's also very important, I think, for Bukowski. We saw this either in the last poem or a few poems ago. Yeah, it was the last poem. For Jane, With All My Love, which was not enough, he wrote about giving up and wanting to just sort of let go and not care anymore. And this, coming from Bukowski, is especially surprising, or at least should signal a particularly great degree of suffering for him. Because he describes himself, and we hear about him in many ways, as a fighter in his poetry. Bukowski fights with his poetry. This is described in the poem The Loser, which we've also read. Bukowski is a fighter, and he cares, and he fundamentally desires to find beauty in the world. See The State of World Affairs from a Third Floor Window. He wants to create symphony in that which is non-symphonic. So, when he does not care, when he is depressed perhaps in this way, or grieving, or however we may want to describe this, it is a signal to us that, like, I guess Bukowski in this poem is being deeply, deeply emotional, right? Because it's a side that is not expressed fundamentally. Of course, the converse is that by writing about these things, Bukowski is simultaneously fighting. Because we know that he fights with his poetry. So this is, of course, some way for him to probably cope with the situation. Yet he does not care. At least he does not care about the tigers finding him, which is probably something we need to figure out. So it's funny, we did like the sort of word association with what a tiger might represent as a symbol in like literally last stream. But if anyone in chat, if we want to do like a little mini symbolic analysis of the tiger and say like what does the tiger normally represent? The first thing I can think of is being hunted as some representation of the tiger. But if anyone else has associations with the tiger, again, this might help us find meaning to the latter half of the poem. That U is not a U. Hunted. For this poem, I assume you are correct. Well, this is my intuition, but I think it's important to look at other meanings of the symbol that we could look at, because we can go with our intuition and say tigers represent hunting something, right? But they can represent other things, and it gives us a little bit more freedom in our analysis to find new meanings and new aspects of the symbol other than maybe what we are led to intuit, right? Sometimes those automatic thoughts and connections actually hurt you, right? The big thing, I would say, like, analysis is about continuing to keep an open mind throughout all things. And it gets difficult when our mind starts to make immediate associations with a poem, right? So, I mean, like, so if we're looking at For Jane, my immediate thought is that the tiger maybe represents something hunting him, some kind of like specter in his mind, perhaps the idea of Jane herself in her death. But once I sort of make that association and lock it into my head, if I just tunnel vision on the hunt and connect everything to it, I'll probably get a reasonable interpretation of the poem. But I also will close myself off to a broader interpretation of like the whole poem, which makes it, I think, important to keep our mind open, let's say looking at the symbol of the tiger. Author Brian Liu, welcome. Good to see you again as well. You've had a nutso 1.5 weeks. That sounds strenuous, and I'm glad. I think that probably implies that this week, or recently, it is now less nutso, and that's probably good. Though you could say tigers also associate with strength. And in that case for this poem, then it's interesting you could say his own strength is turning against him. Drowning Devil, that's beautiful. Okay, I like this a lot. And I might like this more than mine. I see two ways we could take the strength. Very interesting. I think we should dig into that, though. Things and people I love are more stable now. TW material. DM if you wish for details. I think, I mean, yeah, if I want to know, I'll DM you. I hope everyone is doing well, and I hope you are doing well, and amongst all of that, like, that you are keeping yourself well. That's all I'll say. So, associations with the tigers. We have the idea of hunting or being hunted, and we have the idea just of strength, right? Do we have any other associations with the tiger just as a symbol in culture? There was the one of like the mafia owning a tiger, exotic. This is perhaps an association. but yeah, probably not something for this poem, right? I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. Tigers have found me, and I do not care. I guess a more like broad connection than you saying like mafia. Drowning Devil is like wealth, or the idea that they are like exotic. And I could see this maybe fitting into the poem, I'm not certain. But this is another connection. Could also associate them with stoicism. Yeah, they are very quiet, sort of considered like very stoic, focused animals. Regal, in a sense. I think perhaps the symbol of the tiger is adopted by the people in power, or kings, or mafia bosses, because it not only implies strength, but it also has this stoic, regal kind of grace, right? So I do like this. Stoic, regal, and yeah, graceful. Diving into Bukowski. Yes, we are, Brian Liu. So, let's look at these tigers as first what I initially thought. Camouflaged as well. That's good. You don't see them coming. That's good. Camouflaged. This is like pretty much the only symbol in the poem, which is nice because I think it means we can go through all of these potential meanings and say, well, what do we think this means to us, right? So, I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me and I do not care. So, if the tiger is something that is hunting him, right, then perhaps, this is some kind of thing, this is some kind of thought, this is whatever, right, that continues to stalk him that he cannot escape from. I think this is the idea of the hunt, is that you cannot escape. And I think this aligns well, certainly with the last line, the tigers have found me, and I do not care. Right, this probably makes the tiger a good symbol, because it shows that Bukowski is not able to escape whatever these thoughts are. But I don't think the idea of it just being a hunter actually gives us much insight as to what the tiger is showing us about Bukowski, because he already sort of describes it, right? They will not let me be, they have found me. This is the hunt is concluded. But just saying that the tiger is something that hunts, which was my initial thing, doesn't tell us much about how he feels. So let's go to the idea of strength next. The tiger is a representation of strength. I kneel in the nights before strength that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The strength of something, my strength, a different strength, has found me, and I do not care. And perhaps if we're talking about Bukowski's own strength, then this puts a very interesting spin on grief, right? Bukowski, as we described, likes to fight. He wants to fight. Tigers are probably associated with fighting and as well. And in that way, he has this constant desire to fight through his pain. And if the tigers have found me and I do not care, this might in a way actually be a resignation to keep fighting. An odd spin on not caring. But not caring about grieving or actually processing these things anymore, but instead as moving on. Now, this is maybe not consistent with the rest of the poem, though, because we go back before. In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. If he had probably moved on from Jane, then, well, the hours of love, the evening, sunset, golden hour, whatever, these things would certainly not haunt him in the same way. So I think we can rule it out in that regard. But we can also look at the strength maybe as something external to him, right? And that, in fact, he has lost his strength in a way, and he is weak, right? If we have him found by the tigers, giving up, do not care that he has been found, this would be more a representation of his weakness, right? Because a juxtaposition, let's say if we place something very strong next to someone, then it's going to naturally make them look weaker in comparison, right? And he kneels. I think kneeling is an interesting action. It's an action we see often in life. And this is something of, I would say, submission, right? You would kneel before a king. You would kneel out of respect for something. So I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. Right? But even then, I think the strength thing I can't quite connect. The way I took it was like he tries to be strong enough. Tigers that will not let me be, but he can't. And his own want for strength turned against him into something worse. The tigers have found me and I do not care. I really like this drowning devil. So we see him turning to his own strength. kneeling before the tigers. This maybe makes sense. They will not let me be. I'm turning toward them for something of strength. But in reality, the tiger has kind of circled back on him and is now hurting him, which makes it a self-defeating sort of strength. I like this, and I think this fits well with Bukowski's sort of ethos, in a way. Because Bukowski fundamentally, I think, wants to be strong and he wants to fight, as we said. And if strength itself becomes self-defeating, then he would be put into this place where he has no way out and he has nothing to do. He has no option, because his option is always just to keep fighting. I like this Drowning Devil. I think your interpretation is very reasonable. And Stylish Veil had one. I would say the tigress are the looming possibility of death. Death has found him, he does not care. This is probably also very reasonable for Charles Bukowski. And the tiger as a symbol of death is certainly one as well. And that is reasonable, right? I think he's talking about death as something that will surprise you. Nothing is promised, death will come when it pleases. This is a weird birthday? Well, yeah. So, in this regard, right, and Bukowski does talk about this. Bukowski writes a lot about death as this impending thing. I think we see this in, like, Man Dead Alone in a Room or something. This is one of his past poems where he talks about death as impending. He also talks about impending death, I think, in The Swan, right? So, lots of sort of death poems in a row that we've been reading. Again, I love the organization of this book. The way it puts things together and kind of shows you more about Bukowski as you go through and different facets of him. I very much enjoy. So, death as an impending thing. He writes about this before, and in this way, I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. We know he's haunted by impending death. We know that it's something that is on his mind often. Where you, or what you were, will not happen again. And this perhaps speaks to the idea of death, right? The one thing, the one chance, the thing that he had is gone and it will not happen again. Death has permanence as well as its impending nature. And she will not happen again. Death has found him, it is upon him, he does not care. This maybe fits with something else that Bukowski talks about, which is an acceptance of death in his interviews later in life, right? This could be pointing toward a beginning of that understanding for him, where he begins instead to accept death through Jane's death. And by the time he truly processes this, by the time it comes to a sort of mental fruition, then Jane helps him come to that later belief. I like this as well. Let me look at chat. Is there an aquarium in the microwave again? Aquarius in retrograde? I don't think. Yeah, death will come when it pleases. I like this. Yeah, Brian Liu, you were asking, I wonder how he picked 225 days raffle ticket dartboard. So this is 225 days under grass, referring to his wife. Or lover. I'm not sure if it was his wife. And We can presume maybe that this was written 225 days later. I don't know why he would put a number other than what is accurate. Feels bad, man. Yeah, it's a heavy poem for sure. And Stylish Phil, you also talked about death being camouflaged. Death just showing up and doing as it pleases, which maybe fits again with Bukowski's sort of submission before death, acceptance of it. He just realizes that death happens, right? He asks before, is this how it works, right? What you were will not happen again. Tonally, I think these lines feel very similar. Just like... I dropped my pen. I think these two lines are very, very similar. Is this how it works? Asks, is this just the way that death operates in life? Is there really, is that it? Right? In the same way, it's over. It's final. You say Stylish Veil, and your death is not special. Twig in a basket. Dry stick in a basket. This is, I think, a maybe very good observation. Not unique. Unique. Because there are many people who die every day, and thus you are just a twig. Right. I like that as well. "225 days under grass, and you know more than I." Is that an interesting way to start the poem? Okay, maybe this makes sense. But before we get into the first stanza of this poem, I'm going to take a brief break. I'm going to drink some water. Welcome, High Caliber. Sorry that we're running an ad just as you enter, but this is how it must be. I'll be right back. Don't look at the screen. Take care of yourself. All that. Is Pinguino still here? We got ankles on screen. Okay. Okay. More water. Welcome back. I'm still Jenny, still known as 2/3 Lotus, and I hope we're still having a beautiful and artistic day. Now I have perished. No more am I able to be sad, so there is now how but a great sorrowful why. This I understand and know. High Caliber. High Caliber, this poem also has tigers in it, which is cool. I'm gonna read it again, since we're back from break. For Jane. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood. You're a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. Something I just noticed is that when you left, you took almost everything. Maybe relates to, if we're going with Drowning Devil's interpretation of the tiger as Bukowski's strength turned against him, then perhaps she left and all of the strength was taken from Bukowski, because she doesn't necessarily take anything physical with her to death, but she takes the emotional fulfillment from Bukowski, and this leaves him, maybe, in that regard, sort of empty, right, with her leaving. But I also wanted to talk about the first line. I understood it as most of what he was in life. I am nothing without you, that idea. Yeah. And I do think that fits either way, but I think if we're talking about like specifically using Drowning Devil's interpretation of the tigers, then the idea of it taking his strength feels, jeez. My neighbors are having their roof like repaired or replaced or something, so sorry about all like the noise that I presume is coming through my mic. But yeah, I think, and even if it is talking about death, then it does just comment to Bukowski's sorrow, right? I don't think it's specific to the interpretation, but it maybe complements Drowning Devils. So, the first stanza, second line of the poem. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. So, my initial idea upon rereading is that she knows more than he does about death. She is experiencing it, and he is lost. He feels empty. 225 days later, he understands it no more than he did at the beginning, right? This is probably why we mentioned, let's say, the passage of time, if we are using that interpretation. He is lost, and this ties then to, like, is this how it works? And she maybe fundamentally has to acknowledge that this is how it works, because she is dead, and she is subject to that process. And he still maybe wants to resist that. He wants to fight. But he realizes here that either, depending on whether we look at Stylish Fail or Drowning Devil, which there's similar interpretations, one would be that, you know, he is still fighting, and he is still fighting in vain, and this is what happens, and his desire to fight turns against him in this. Or, with maybe Stylish Fails, we find him completely accepting that death is out of his hands. And I think these are both very reasonable Bukowski interpretations. And I'm not sure like which one I prefer. I wonder if there's a date for when the poem came out. Not that it matters to the poem, but then we could see the day she died on. That is true. I invite you to go find that. I guess I'll ask chat, does anyone have other ideas? You know more than I. What does she know more about? Her knowing, right? Like, she is dead. And to me, this means the only thing she can sort of know is death. And this is why he has struggled. She is ascended, so some sort of more like divine knowledge. Is that what you mean? Stylish veil. I think that probably makes sense. In that regard, now she sort of sits in a theoretical like heaven or beyond, even if it's not referring to like a heaven, but she has escaped mortality, ascended into something else, and now she has some kind of different perspective. It's impossible to understand from the earthly realm, so you can only say you know more than I know. I like this. Some kind of, I'm going to call this like a divine understanding. That she is in the beyond. I find this tends to have some feeling, thinking about the person beyond knowing or understanding or watching. We hear these terms often, and I think this probably often gives me the feeling of continued attachment. Right, where he is still longing for her. He still in some way creates in his mind a version of her that is alive. This is natural, this is what we do. And I think that's mainly the like operative thing that causes people to talk about, you know, they're watching from above. They have long taken your blood. You are a dry stick in a basket. Is this how this works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. This line is one of the most powerful in the poem to me. I think this expresses that maybe this is Bukowski's first experience with genuine, like, soul-shattering loss, right? Is this how it works? Is all you can ask? Is this what death is? Is this what it's supposed to be? Is this what I'm suffering? And maybe I like this line particularly because I have thought about this before. I don't think I've suffered great loss in my life. I have not loved someone to an extraordinary degree and then lost them. Right? 2 of my grandparents are dead, both of my grandpas, but like, I did not know them well enough, I think, to be destroyed. But for example, if like one of my parents, my siblings died tomorrow, one of my closest friends, then I might understand this. And I might be in that same situation. Is this how it works? Right? I'm finding quite a bit of info on Jane. It's all consistent, but also on Facebook. And Genius. So who knows if they're accurate. Yeah, it's really hard to find good information on Bukowski. One of my grandfathers died at the grand everybody show up birthday he'd put together for his wife. He died. on his wife's birthday celebration? That sounds tragic. Wow. That is like absurd. That is like a level of like cosmic like irony, right? Yep, he had a heart attack in the back room. He said, "I'm gonna have a nap. Call me in for cake." Wow. That's wild. My dad's best my dad's best man's mom died on his wedding. Y'all have such brutal stories of people losing things in good situations. Uh, this is quite an interesting mood we have in chat. My great aunt looked around at everyone and said, I was like, "Do we need a wake? Everyone's here. I swear he planned this." That's really good. High five, crazy stories. It's always the aunts. Haven't known many people that have died, so I can't give anything. See, I'm the same here, Drowning Devil. Imagine the first deep tragedy of loss I'll have in my life is when Harper dies. My dog. He is. I love him in very deep and unconditional ways, and I promised him that I would not kill myself as long as he was in my life. So I think when he dies, it will be quite a struggle. It's one of the few promises I've made, like that in recent times, since I stopped making promises. I've lost a lot of pets, but I've never had anyone I was close with die. Yeah. Like I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of like my dog died poems when my dog dies. Like to like a unreasonable amount. I'd probably be like John Wick level of like suffering, you know? I had the same promise with myself, but for my grandma. That's good. See, with him, it was always like, if I just died, he would in no way understand. At least my family would be able to conceptualize, like, why I killed myself. Like, they would know the reason I am gone, right? But, like, the dog would just be like, where did she go? You know, and that's crushing. You have permission to joke about my death. I do like joking about death, Pilsner Grip. I wonder if I should write a poem about my old dog Max. He had an interesting final month. You definitely could. We can write about lots of things. And welcome in, Pilsner. We might read your poem today, after Bukowski. I was thinking about it. Depending on how I feel. So, we have this poem for Jane, which is mostly just about death and Bukowski's lack of understanding and either coming to acceptance or coming to continue a fruitless fight, as we've sort of found. Does anyone have questions on this poem? Specific lines, parts of it? We're not done, but I just want to like check. Like, any favorite lines? You know, like my favorite line is probably, "Is this how it works?" That or "What you were will not happen again." But do we have thoughts in chat on this poem? Does anyone not like it? I can read it again while you all consider. For Jane. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood, and you're a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. You like the tigers have found me and I do not care. Yes, I think that is, if I had like 3 favorite lines, it's, you will not happen again. Is this how this works in the tigers? I also like the dry stick in the basket with the connection that you made, Stylish Fail. There's this stanza in the middle that I haven't really touched at all. In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. And my first impression, or my, I guess, multiple impression after like 40 minutes of this, is that I don't think I like this line that much, if we're talking critique. I mean, like, Bukowski has talked about the room before, and the way that rooms with people are important to him, and it probably feels alone being in the room, and that's like a representation of his life, right? Like we also have the room as like a broader thing of your life. We have the room as a broader thing of like the self, which maybe means that more so he's fundamentally haunted. During the hours of love, and there's in this room, the hours of love still make shadows. And maybe hours of love is maybe not referring to a time of day, like let's say sunset, but more so the collective hours of love that they have together experienced, right? As to say that there is almost a physical specter, right? Because only something physical can cast a shadow, that the memory of their love still casts a shadow over the room, which I actually really like as imagery if I interpret it that way. So now I like this stanza and have no critique left. I really do need to finish the play I started that takes place in a funeral home and starts with, I don't think that's his suit. Hooray, death poems. I like that first line. Author Brian Liu. So I guess I like the room, actually. Dang it. This is the thing. If I think about something enough, I'd stop disliking it. I don't have much critique. They have long taken your blood. I mean, this is just embalming, probably. And I like this, so I actually really like this. I think this is what sets up for me to think about him talking about a casket, because they have long taken your blood maybe implies that she was embalmed before death. You take out the fluids, you replace it with embalming stuff, and you put them in a casket, and then he sort of subverts that expected word by saying basket, which also probably... we think about caskets as a very like powerful thing, this symbol of death, this really like, we bury people in really like fine expensive boxes, and then we subvert by the basket being like a mundane existence. But I think it's only when we set up the expectation of casket, which we do so elegantly, I guess, in 3 lines. Under grass means they were like buried, and then taken your blood, embalmed, right? So this is probably really well done. This poem's quite efficient. I don't think it wastes time. Without this, would we have enough, like, longing for her? Took everything. Yeah, like how I like to critique poems is sort of saying, is there anything that we can get rid of? Is there any way we can make this sort of more condensed, more powerful? And it turns out, at least with Charles Bukowski's published poems, I find little success doing something like that. Shocker, he's a good poet. I think that's all that I have for this poem, unless there are, again, other questions on it or my thoughts on specific words, lines, phrases, ideas, whatever. This was a good poem. I think this was a good poem as well, Drowning Devil. I like it quite a bit. Okay, I will take that as no other comments. I'm going to read this again, and then we'll move on to something else. I might read this 2 times. I like this poem a lot. I have to imagine that when I experience grief, this is something I'll come back to. For Jane. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood, you are a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. For Jane by Charles Bukowski. Thanks for listening to me and my thoughts on Bukowski. Make sure to check out the rest of the series if you enjoyed, and follow or stop by Twitch if you want to see more. See you there.